Here are the two Philcos I mentioned in the earlier video, side by side. Excuse the clutter, I need to clean off my workbench before I really dig into these, but I wanted to get a good look before I start doing any work. So I made a mistake in the earlier video where I called this a Philco 118. It's actually an 18. It's clearly on the back of the chassis. On that tag down there, I'll show you later, it says 18, and this is definitely from a 118. It's marked inside the cabinet. However, as you can see, I think, very, very, very similar. You can look at the schematics and they're darn near identical, actually. I believe the tube layout is identical, as is the chassis layout. There's a little bit of difference down below. And so some things I picked out right away were these are the older style knobs, newer style knobs. There's about a year difference between these two. Like maybe that's a 33 and that's a 34. And I believe the shadow meter is slightly different. And there's probably some minor differences in the way the circuitry is wired. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure it's the same power transformer, output transformer. And they sure look similar. And so this is the one that was sent to me for restoration, and this is the one that I picked up a couple 3 years ago on Craigslist. And this one is in better condition. It has the capacitors, which I think are the original. I think they actually were different height originally, and this one they're missing, but now we know what that mangled clamp should look like. And what this missing tube shield should be here. And so I guess it's only missing one shield. Yeah, we got two of the three shields are here. We need to get one for this, and there's a missing 80 rectifier. Now let's take a look below. Here's a look at the back sides. This is the chassis type 18, code 121. And this is the chassis type 118, code 121. Now actually I did just notice one difference pretty readily. This has two trimmer caps here. This does not. Perhaps they use different IF transformers. Curious. And I think it's pretty apparent these are the original power cords. See, this has a brown cloth covering with a knot tied there. And that type of power plug. This has a darker brown, similar knot, and a somewhat different end. I think it's actually plastic rather than Bakelite, or some type of hard rubber. Alright, now what about the actual electronics? At first glance, pretty darn similar. Chassis mounts are a little different. This has ears that bolt down to the console, whereas this comes from a Tombstone, I believe. They have a somewhat similar electrolytic cap up here. Very low microfarads, though, per section. This one's 4-section, 3, 1, 1, and 2 microfarad, whereas this is just 3-section. And I believe that's the 4th electrolytic down there. Seem to have very similar big power resistors here. Some bleeder network to provide different voltages used throughout the radio. Bakelite blocks look fairly similar. Controls look fairly similar. But there are definitely some differences. So in here we've got two trimmer caps up here. Here we do not, but we've got two down here, whereas here we don't. So maybe it's just as simple as that. They got relocated. And some of the dog bones appear a little different. Like here we've got a white one. And then this guy up here, whereas here, I think that's similar, but it's routed over in this direction. And there's also been some work done on these seal tight, or solar caps rather. I'm pretty darn sure are later caps, whereas the originals would have been all Philco branded. So it won't be quite as simple as I had initially thought, that I could just do them side by side, mirror image exactly the same. Going to be some subtle differences. I'll have to be careful as I go. I think I will do this one first, since that was sent to me by a client to get restored. And if I get stuck anywhere, I'm hoping this is similar enough that it can guide me. Okay, time to really dig into this chassis. Now notice in the back that this is a code 121. Well, if you go to Nostalgia Air and get the schematic for the Model 18, it's actually going to be a different code. I believe 124. Luckily, I dug through my original Philco service info and found that I do have the service info for both revisions. I made some photocopies and enlarged it. Here is the schematic, and here is the parts placement diagram with parts list, and then I enlarged just the top portion. Now finally, we get this capacitor down here identified, and yes indeed it is original. It is 10 microfarad cap. This little guy down here, it's used for filtering the negative bias supply that's developed through this network. So center tap, as so common on these Philcos, it's not grounded. Center tap goes up through this resistor and then to ground. So there's actually a negative voltage with respect to ground across these resistors. It's filtered by this little cap down here. Now, I had mentioned earlier that the original caps were gone. Well, after I did some investigation under the chassis, yeah, there are actually 2 new caps that were hidden under here to replace them. I got an 8 microfarad here, and I think it is a 10 up in here. Yeah, 10. Other than that, I don't think much work was done on this at all. So this original Philco cap and this were still wired in. I did a little nuts here in preparation to see about replacing it. Now something else I've gone ahead and done is replace the line bypass caps in here, because I want to power this up and test that power transformer. Also wired in a temporary replacement modern vinyl power cord, because the original was super crusty. So these are the caps I replaced. If you're going to power one of these radios up, I suggest you either disconnect those or replace them, because they have a tendency to go out, and it's right across the AC line, or rather from the either side of the AC line to ground. You don't want to mess with having one of those caps fail. They tend to explode, blow the side out of the Bakelite cap. It's all ugly. Alright, so got the new power cord wired in. Get those caps replaced into that Bakelite block. So it's time to do a little power up test with the 80 tube removed. Meaning all we're going to get is power going to the filaments of these tubes, and I can stick my voltmeter down in there and see what's going on. It's a quick, easy, and safe way to test a power transformer to see if it's shorted out or dead or not. So, got it plugged in, and here we go. Dial lamp's a little flaky. What's coming on? This light appears to be out, but the tubes are lighting up. So I got a little bit dirty connection on that dial lamp, and perhaps this bulb is burned out. That's the lamp for the shadow meter. The other tube filaments all look normal. Oh, I took the 42 tubes out because when they're in and this radio's on its side, it was actually pushing up against this tube. Alright, well, let's see what we get down in here. The larger pins are the filaments, so that should be about 5 volts. Excellent, 4.9998. And secondary should be, yeah, it seems reasonable. So that's across the entire secondary. This uses a center tap and a full wave rectifier, so it's actually more like 360 volts or so that will get rectified and then filtered. Speaking of that, something a little bit different in this radio. So power transformer seems to be good, so good news there. Something a little bit different in this radio is that is actually a filter choke, standalone filter choke. It's not the usual field coil from the speaker, so I think that's this guy right here. So you want to check for continuity in that guy. And then this is the output transformer, which is also the phase inverter. So it's driven by this 42 tube, and then drives the grids on these 42 tubes, which are, and the outputs will be 180 degrees out of phase, so you can push-pull output there. Alright, so let's take a quick look at this bulb, see if we can get it to light up. And also want to check the resistance on the 42 field coil. A little tricky to get out. It's a threaded bulb, and then it's got this hood that goes over it. This whole thing's a bit loose because the rubber mounts on the tuning cap are really dried out and shot. 6.8. Don't see a number on there, and yeah, that sure does look burned out to me. So let's see what we got on hand here. Oh, and if you were watching my earlier Philco 3710 restoration, the soft white LED replacement bulbs for that have shown up, so I'll be installing those soon. Let's see, I think one of these bulbs will do. It's number 46. I can do a little research and find out the exact bulb. Philco is pretty good with not telling you what type of bulbs they use. So it just says 65. We go on the parts list. Let's see what 65 is. It's a pilot lamp. Thanks. No number there. Alright, get this hood back on here and give this another try. Alright, we have illumination for the shadow meter. Cool. You can kind of see. Now, that's what it would look like from the front of the radio. So there's a little movable vein in there. If I tap it, it's wiggling a little. So underneath this, there's a coil with a whole bunch of wires. And this is a vein that works exactly the same as an analog meter. Sensitive movement in there with instead of a needle, it's a vein that will move back and forth and block out the light. It works just like an eye tube. It's a tuning indicator. Now, I've had some luck testing these before by taking the two wires, going to that coil, and powering it from a function generator with a really low frequency sine wave, which will cause the needle to move back and forth. That's what I propose doing with this radio, to do a quick test on that. I checked for continuity. It's wired into the circuit, so that might be throwing things off. I really need to disconnect these two wires to know for sure. I really want to find that out sooner than later, because it's a very difficult thing to fix. I'm not really up for the challenge of rewinding one if it does need to be rewound. I know it uses really, really fine wire and many, many, many turns, and I do not have a coil winding set up. I haven't done it before. So if it is dead, I'll be looking for a replacement or finding somebody who could rewind it for me. Two wires for that shadow meter come down through a hole in the chassis right down in here. One of them is this red wire that comes up here, so I want to undo it from that, and the other one goes around to one of the lugs on this coil here. The other thing I wanted to point out was this. Sometimes you might come across a Philco radio and you see something like this with three components connected in midair going off somewhere. And you might think, oh, that's got to be a later replacement. There's no way that they would do a factory wiring job like that. Well, yes, indeed they did. Same with this over here. I see guys who do restoration, they get criticized sometimes for when they just hack in new parts down below and there's wiring like hanging in air like this. Well, sometimes that is actually how they did it back in the day. At least they put a little bit of spaghetti sleeving over it to insulate it a bit. I guess they just didn't have any lugs on these Bakelite blocks around here to connect it to and decided that that would be good enough. Okay, I undid one lead of the shadow meter and attached some long alligator leads to it. And I've fired up a WaveTech 183 function generator. Now, even though I have the DC offset turned off, I don't want any chance of burning out that coil, so I'm going to use a DC blocking capacitor. I just grabbed an arbitrarily large one. It's 8.2 microfarad. Big old film cap. So it'll let low frequencies go through, but block any DC from getting to that meter. So what I'm going to try doing is driving that meter movement directly from this function generator. And I will turn this on because I want to get that illumination from the bulb. Alright, I'll put this, let's tilt this back so you guys can see that. So there is the shadow meter. I've got the frequency down pretty low, amplitude down super low, put it on sine wave, continuous waveform, and I start turning up that output. I've got this thing down really low, so I'm just going to turn it up a bit more. It's starting to move a little. Let's go to the highest output level. Turn up. There we go. Alright. I'll turn that frequency down even more. We're not getting full deflection, but that could be because this is just isn't putting on a voltage. Also, a possibility that the magnet on the meter movement's gotten weak. I know guys have had trouble with that before, but this is a very, very good sign. So we have continuity, and the vane is moving. With the set powered up at this normal operating range, it may very well be working just fine as it is. Now I'm turning my attention to the two main filter caps. If you recall, the originals were gone, and this little tongue that sticks out here had been bent over at 90 degrees, and these double hoops here were kind of mangled up. Well, with the help of a C-clamp and some channel locks and some metal plates to prevent scarring this up, I got it back into position, and I straightened out the hoops there, and as I had hoped, these do fit very nicely. Let's tighten this down here and hold it in even better. And there we go. That will do quite nicely. No, not quite the originals, but they fit in here. They will do the job just great. Don't need to be restuffing any caps or try to track down original replacement cans, which is kind of hard to do for a radio this old. And they could be spray painted, or they could be hidden inside of a thin-walled aluminum tube. And they don't have a whole lot of tolerance though with these. These fit in here pretty darn snugly, so maybe putting them inside a metal tube wouldn't be all that practical. Yeah, I don't even think they look that bad as is. I could rotate them around so all the modern markings are not visible, and you would just see, well, a white cylinder basically. So there's that one, and there's that one. So I think that's actually a pretty nice clean look. I was asked where I got these. Mauser Electronics, amongst others. I will endeavor to remember to put a link. They come in a whole bunch of different sizes. I think that the lowest is around 1 or 2.2 microfarad. These are 8, just like the originals. Price on them has been coming down steadily compared to, certainly a lot less expensive than they were a few years back. I think these were under 5, maybe just under $5 a piece. So yeah, sure, a little electrolytic you get for a buck or two, 8 microfarad, 450 volts. But these can take more than 450 volts. They're rated for AC operation, to be honest, not DC. But I poked around and I did find some ratings on them, some DC voltage rating, and I'm sure they're good for at least 500 volts. And I think they can probably take a bit more than that. These are rated for 30,000 hours at 420 volts AC and 10,000 hours at 470 AC. Well, that's AC, that's not DC. And if you can handle how much AC, you can handle more than that DC. So I think it's a good option. And really, it's also what you really care about is the peak, because once this set has warmed up, there will be considerably less voltage on these than there is at the peak when you first turn it on. And that can be mitigated with the use of a thermistor on the AC line, which I will be installing in this as well. So we'll see. We'll see once this is all wired in when we turn it on, but I wouldn't be surprised if the peak AC voltage, or sorry, the peak DC voltage on a cold start is well under 450 volts. So these should last for a very, very long time. Just occurred to me, if they make a slightly smaller version, that'd be an awesome replacement for this guy. Now this is 10 microfarad, and I know if I get one rated for 10 microfarad, it's going to be at least as big, if not bigger, which maybe would just fit, but certainly overkill. This doesn't have anywhere near as much voltage on it as the others. Probably a cap rated for, this is only a 10 microfarad 40 volt capacitor. But if they make a smaller version of this, it's rated for less voltage, that'd be kind of cool. Doesn't quite fit in this hole, but that'd be really nice to fit in there. So I'll take a look around for that. Meanwhile, I have checked continuity in these guys, and it is good, so I'm inclined to leave them in here. And I think I'll leave you off with that. I'm just going to get to it and start rebuilding all these Bakelite blocks, replacing the resistors, and a few paper caps that are in here.